You're listening to Real Estate and Bourbon. Whether you like it neat or on the rocks, you're in the right place. And now your host, Dawn Roy.
Oh my goodness, friends. Thank you for joining us today. And we're going to do episode 8. Oh my gosh. I can't believe it's episode 8, Michael.
It's crazy.
And this is You Don't Know What You Don't Know. And maybe you need to know some stuff from the right people. Today I have Charles Merrill with C&F Mortgage, a delightful, fantastic lender.
Thank you.
All around good Joe.
Thank you.
The reason I have a bourbon issue, this is the man who introduced me to bourbon during the COVID. I was collecting corks, as a good human should, and had collected a good amount of red wine corks because I like dry red wines. And you said to me, I think we were on the phone, and you said, Dawn, you're the perfect palate to transition to bourbon. And I said,
was I right?
What?
Was I right?
You were 100% right. We want to give a shout out to Michael and Eddie and the guys at Studio 77 before we get too far down the road.
Whoop, whoop.
But I do want to introduce this bourbon. This is a Blanton's. It's a B. It's my very first bottle. You bought it for me in Connecticut with your sweet wife, Taylor. And so we're going to do a little bourbons, and I want you to be the one to make the first pour.
Yeah, I had to buy it in Connecticut because it's so darn hard to find in Virginia. But,
which is a shame.
It is a shame. I think it's a really good, decent bourbon. I think there's a lot of discussion about this bourbon.
Right.
I've heard both sides of it being overrated and underrated, and I'll tell you, I just think it's a good quality bourbon.
Right.
I wouldn't spend too much on it, but yeah, it's a good bourbon.
Well, I'm in love with it, and I'm so grateful to have you here today. And you, like I said, you're the one that got me into this. And cheers to you, my friend. He's taught me how to sip it.
What's the proof on this one?
This is what is this thing? 93.
93.
So it's a little strong first thing in the morning, but
It's
my sweet spot.
It's a little kick.
He is up for the challenge. So this is what lenders and realtors do on our off time. Is he will call me because he's more plugged into the community. I mean, you really are. I mean, you know what you're looking for.
Uh-huh.
You know what when the ABC store here in Virginia throws off something, you're like, oh. This is worth going after, blah, blah, blah. And me, I'm just like, oh, the labels are pretty and the bottle it's a pretty shape. So he calls me one day and goes, hey, your ABC store has this. There's 3 of them. Go get one. Send me a picture when you have it in the car. Forget this contract. I'm off. So I raced to the ABC store. The last bottle is walking past me. I'm like, Charlie, I missed it. He goes, hold on, I'm rerouting you.
We got you there, didn't we?
He reroutes me to another ABC store. I get it. It truly 100 proof, 115 proof.
Yeah.
I get home that night. I pour me a little bit, and at the time, I was pouring it straight like this. Right, this is neat.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And I had one. I was like, ooh, mama, that one's a little tight. And so I took a photo of it, and he's like, so how are you feeling? I'm like, I got to lay down.
Yeah. If I remember correctly, we were a little angry in that call, too.
I was like, my throat is tightening up. So that being said, you've never steered me wrong. Good. And I have learned, because you do, through some really neat people like yourself and Mac McCormick and all of these guys, have taught me how to drink bourbon neat, which is such a better experience. And if it is a little heavy for you, you just put droplets of water. Mm-hmm. Till it kind of settles down.
I think I don't think there's a wrong way to drink bourbon unless,
right.
If you're willing to spend the money on it, you can drink it any way you want to. I don't get into all the hype with these guys. And if you read all the blogs, and they'll tell you it's, the best bourbon is the one you're drinking, right? And that's
or the one you like.
Yes, what I live by. And, I tried a lot of bourbons. I try to be, smart about my bourbon purchasing, and if I come across a bottle like this, it's more allocated, and I find it in the state, I'll grab it. Hence why you got this bottle.
And here. I'm looking for Willet now.
We got a couple different ones. I've got a couple at the house. So we talk about that too.
Is bourbon something where your palate changes as you get into it more, or is it something you stick with? Like, I'm trying to think of it. What am I into? And it's like music and guitars. And it's like, I've been using the same pick for almost 30 years. Like the same style, same brand. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, is bourbon like that, where it's like you have your your go-to, and then you have other things you try, or
It is for me, I think.
Yeah, I think they should have a good budget bourbon. I mean, some of these bourbons, whether you're buying them at retail or on secondary, they can be quite costly. And, I like to have my go-tos, and then I like to branch off. I have a special occasion, I might break out something a little more costly. But yeah, I think
Well, is it costly? Like when I'm standing at the ABC store taking a photo of the things that have been released, and the $150 bottle, you're like, get that one. What? Not the $49.99, the $149.99.
Well, I think in that case,
but it's a beautiful piece. I mean, it's like it's one you sip occasionally. It's
well, how long does that last? If you were to pay like the $80 one,
mini bottles that are just a few glasses out.
It's funny because my wife always kind of chuckles as she walks by the liquor cabinet, and
she's like, we could retire.
Yeah, we have quite a few bottles that probably need to be finished that just sit there, and I do have some dust collectors, and I do I'm not afraid to say I've got some bottles that I won't open unless there is a special occasion. So
right. Well, in this one, you kept hammering me and saying, have you opened that Blanton's yet? Have you opened that Blanton's yet? And I'm like, it has to be a special occasion. It's too important to me. Ta-da! And this is it.
Great.
This is it. Let the folks know a little bit about you, Charlie. I mean, I know you personally and professionally. I mean, I've done business with you multiple times, and I just want folks to understand your background and where you're coming from, and then we're going to launch into some funny shit that goes on behind the scenes. Let's go ahead. It is already, you give mom a bourbon, there you go. Little quarter in the swear jar.
You better put one on over there. One more quarters over there next to him.
I'm pretty good, actually.
He doesn't flip the profanity like mama does.
Yeah, I'm the same way.
I'm glad that you guys let me be me. So.
I will say it's a nice change to have a little bourbon first thing in the morning. They do say that your palate is actually
okay. Hold on, just for the viewing public, it is 10:20 a.m. Okay, it's not 6.
Yeah.
Okay, let's get that straight. And it just happens that this is a good time for the team to record.
We should have called it the morning bourbon.
It's the morning bourbon talk.
Morning hangover. Morning start off hangover.
I will say it tastes delightful first thing.
I know. We don't hate it. But give us a little update on who you are, my friend.
Sure. Well, thank you. I've been lending this is my 26th year, actually.
You started at 15?
Yeah, I know, right? I look great. I decided, it was funny, I was a bartender when I first started out, and I had a manager of a local mortgage company,
right.
a regular customer of mine. She would come on in, and back when I was in my early 20s, I thought I was fancy, and I was throwing bottles and spinning this and spinning that, and always had a big personality. And she asked me after a few times meeting, if I'd be interested in maybe possibly doing a day job. And I'm like
normal people, not like a bat.
And so she kind of pitched me the idea of being a loan officer, and my first reaction was, "What, are you kidding me? I mean,
that's corporate.
I'm 22 years
corporate.
old. I'm
that's the man.
Yeah, like I'm
not gonna be part of the system.
6 to 2, like 6 at night to 2 in the morning. I get to sleep in. I watch cartoons. Come on, no.
I watch cartoons.
So after about a year of that, I realized that maybe this wasn't probably my direction.
Not a long-term solution to one's life goals.
No, it wasn't. So I actually took her up on an opportunity. I spent the next 12 years as a broker here in Richmond area, and then transitioned into correspondent lending, which is what I'm in now.
Yeah.
So, I spent all of my career here lending in the Richmond market, helping thousands of people here. I've seen lots of different trends. I've seen, lots of different products.
Well, I come to you when I'm looking for data. I email and you're like, okay, Charlie, what's really going on? Because the media says one thing, and that's the thing that, Michael and I have talked about this. I get so many calls or emails or text messages from, even my base or others, friends, what's going on. Here's the favorite question. When's the market going to crash? It's not. Okay. It might be more expensive to buy, but homes aren't losing value. And Richmond, by the way, is one of in the top 10% of the home values staying the same and or increasing. Okay.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
I always holler at you just to get that inside data from a lender's perspective. I mean, I can do my own data from the retail perspective, but to see the different that's two different entities and who's looking at what.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean? And I think that's a perfect segue into you don't know what you don't know. I mean, I get called, you get called. People get themselves into situations based on what they think they know or what they're listening to on the news or, God love them, what some friend has told them on Facebook or they've learned it on TikTok. Gosh. If we didn't have TikTok, I don't even know where we were.
Some of my favorite ones, I get the calls where, I don't need representation. I don't need an agent. I can do this.
Oh, yeah.
It's easy.
Right.
Why save myself 6%? And that, as a lender, I will tell you, when I hear those words, I just, my stomach sinks. And for a lot of reasons.
Yeah.
I mean, we have a symbiotic relationship, real estate agents and loan officers. We have to have strong partnerships. I mean, these are large transactions, right? I mean, people are.
It's your largest financial instrument. It's the biggest thing you're going to buy.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, I don't get out of bed in the morning thinking I can fix my truck, right? I mean, if it breaks down,
I don't clean my own teeth, and I have a degree from MCV.
I bring it right down to the Chevrolet dealership,
right?
And so. I think that's a big misnomer that that real estate agents and mortgage professionals, this business, and let me tell you, it's a hard business, right? I mean, that it's easy, fast money, and anybody can do it.
That couldn't be further from the truth.
I mean, we're kind of seeing it now. I mean, as the market is difficult, we're seeing a lot of exiting from the.
Well, we're seeing the order takers leave the business.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, no offense. If just writing paper was your strong suit and your skill set, you're not going to be here for the long haul.
Right.
Because I was with a client yesterday. She owns a home. She wants to invest in property, which is fabulous idea, something to monetize. And we can't really find anything. And I said, then we're going to have to do the old fashioned stuff. And we go through tax records and we look at, the property address versus where the person lives. Is it a landlord situation? Does the house look run down? How do we contact people to generate, shake the tree?
Mm-hmm.
And that's really what it means. You've got to be more than answering the phone and text message and, writing paperwork. That has to be. And you had a great story to talk about that. So I get a lot of buyers who will say, well, I'm going to call the listing agent on a home that's listed in the MLS, because if they don't have to pay a buyer's agent, they'll, cut the commission. And I said, well, this is how this works. The seller is just going to make more, and they're getting paid. You're not going to benefit from any. If there's a reduction in anything, the seller will benefit, not you. And now you've gone in court by yourself. As an analogy, you're there unrepresented by any, and the other guy's got like the best attorneys the DOJ can provide.
Yeah.
That's what you're doing. And you had one that not only did the buyer not have a representative, but the seller was a FSBO.
Yeah, correct.
Was a for sale by owner.
We had it. Yeah, we doubled down on that one.
Well, that's a hot mess.
Wait, what? What now?
Basically, the borrower was unrepresented, and so was the seller. So the seller was.
They
selling
decided
their
to
own
go
home,
into a transaction together.
and the buyer was also representing themselves.
And you were the lender for the buyer.
Yeah, I was lending on the buy side. So I tell people, look, that's your prerogative. I will absolutely try to feed them enough facts to say, look, we need to have a professional on both sides. It makes sense. It makes my job easier. It makes your life easier. Right. And there's certain things that I'm going to require as a lender that you may not know how to produce. Right.
100%.
There's certain verbiage that I can use, that I'll use, or different. Could be inspections to whatever that I'm going to need, depending on loan program, that you may not be able to accomplish, right? So,
right.
I had a situation earlier this year where I had a family come to me, and they were absolutely against using an agent, which, again, using my spiel. Like, I try to stay on my lane. I will help you as much as I can,
right.
But the truth is, I'm not a licensed real estate agent. I mean,
right.
I'm registered and licensed to do mortgages. It's a very different animal,
it's totally
right?
Different.
And when it comes down to contract law, I don't sit there and try to break down what the legalities are of a contract, whether you can get in or out of one.
Right.
And I had a situation where this woman came to me, and prime example, the communication was poor. The communication with the seller was almost nil, and I really, I was very upfront and I was nice about it, but I told the seller, I can't represent you at all. I mean, you'll have to hire your own attorney and deal
Oh,
with.
absolutely. I mean, we're going to have separate camps.
Oh my gosh,
You know
yeah.
what I mean?
I can't.
Two different title companies, the
absolutely.
whole 9 yards.
And I'll do what I can to help educate the borrower when it comes to the contract that's in front of me.
Okay.
But that's about where it stops.
Right.
Long story short, the borrower's communication was so poor that when dealing with my staff, my processing staff, she brought a contract in that was to be determined as a closing date. So
That's
she
always fun.
Yeah, and what I
That
find
might
out
that might work on new construction, but on residential resale,
Yeah.
How is
you
that-
need to have a finite date.
How can you let that happen?
What do you mean?
Like, how do they you can't you can't go to a car dealership and say, "Oh, to be determined when I'm buying this car."
Oh,
and
I
then
know,
try
right?
to, how does that? How is that okay? Like, I don't.
Well, in this particular case, I mean, she was trying to negotiate the sale of another property that was hers. So it was a domino effect kind of
Oh,
scenario.
even better. It's the
Right.
story
So,
gets even
yeah. So she was trying to, and again, this is all in the idea of saving some money, right? So, she's trying to negotiate a sale of her house to buy this new house unrepresented to a seller that's unrepresented. So it was a train wreck already from the beginning. The TBD, to be determined, address was because she didn't really know
when she was going to close on
the sale,
her primary,
right? I mean,
right?
So we had probably one agent involved, which was on the other side of her sale,
Yeah.
the buyer side.
So at the far end of the train,
We had one person represented correctly. So, long story drawn out, she ended up getting that transaction closed, but instead of relaying the closing date for the new transaction, she just assumed our team realized that the close of her sale
So
meant,
she did get her primary residence.
She did.
Sold.
Yes.
We're good
but didn't communicate the new closing date.
for the buy.
The buy side. Yeah.
So what happened?
Well, I mean, after repeated emails and requests from her for documentation, I get a call at 10 o'clock. That's horrible. I feel horrible for her. We did, just, full disclosure, we did get it closed, but the morning of what she perceived to be her closing date,
Right.
I got a call at 10 o'clock in the morning and said, "Hey, we're sitting at the closing table."
With who?
Yeah. I'm not sure. I mean, we have
There's a party and I wasn't invited.
And I remember having that conversation, and I was totally set back as, this is not how business is done. There's
Well, did she even have a loan package in front of her?
that's the thing. There's government oversight. There's requirements by RESPA. I have to have CDs out in 3 days prior to. There's all these things that have to happen that we put in place
to protect her.
Right. And
right?
So long story short, she didn't close on the day that she was intending. She did have a moving truck full of furniture. She didn't have a. Oh yeah.
Thought she was pulling right on up.
She did. And I had a very direct conversation with the attorney, and basically, I mean, how do you put everybody in this position when you don't have a loan package? And
So, not to make a lot of waves, because that's not who I am. I don't, speak disparagingly, but she had an attorney who didn't have a loan package, who created an appointment and had her sitting at their
Absolutely.
conference
Correct.
table
Yeah.
for an event that had no shot in hell of ever doing anything.
that's correct. And that I think that's more of my, as upsetting as the whole scenario was.
Let's take a sip on that one.
You do want to put, there's blame to go around, right? I mean, there's in that scenario, but the borrower doesn't have the knowledge that the attorney would have or the agents would have to
But
properly
in
process.
true, I will, and in defense of whatever attorney she had closing this bad boy, they're going on what she's telling them. But still, there's no communication between the lender
Correct.
and
The attorney.
right, because
So,
an entire
it shouldn't
deed
have happened.
package has to be
Yeah.
presented, a lender package has to be presented. I mean, it's paperwork. We're killing trees.
Yeah, no, it's
in
true.
the loan industry. That's, that is not a quick thing to turn around.
And it's a wild story, right? I mean, if you think about it from a real estate brain, that's a wild scenario. It should never happen.
Right.
But this happened this year, 2022.
When things were nuts.
It didn't happen 10 years ago.
No,
right?
this is a recent event.
Right. So, it was one for my books, and we talked about this off camera.
That's
It's something that doesn't happen. It doesn't happen, right? So these type of things, there's reasons why we have, safety nets in place for these type of things not to happen.
well.
but it
Listen,
happened.
as much as I don't like politicians, I don't care if you're an R, a D, or an I. But the Dodd-Frank Act, which created TRID, which is the reason now we have a 3-day disclosure to any buyer of their CD, their closing disclosure. Whew, right out the window.
Yeah,
Out the window.
I lived through that time when, the collapse.
Because we used to change HUD statements on the fly.
I mean,
that.
Legally.
Legally, but sitting at the closing table,
Yes,
if there was an error,
yes.
Then the paralegal would get up, run, make some changes, reprint those pages, and come back.
Yeah, and I think that
that you don't do that anymore.
No, and I think that's why we needed this government oversight to a point, right? I think the problem with our industry or the government as a whole is it's always far one way or the other, right? It always reaches too far in one direction. It takes years for it to kind of bounce back.
Yeah.
We're quickly starting to see some of that trying to change slightly for the better, but the Dodd-Frank as a whole wasn't a bad thing. We definitely need to put things in place.
We did have some adjustments to make that, to implement that, especially because prior to Dodd-Frank, title companies and paralegals initiated the closing disclosures. Now it's the lender. That's the difference. It all comes on from the lender side.
Well, the initial does, correct.
The initial does, right? Mm-hmm. So all the numbers have to start flowing in from you guys, and then the paralegals and whoever gather the documentation based on what you
So
I'd
like to explain to people that, especially customers, that, the initial CD is kind of it's an overview of what we've already discussed. This is the transaction as that we have discussed initially.
Right.
The final CD is now going to include the seller side. Anything that we're not representing, it's the balancing, it's the payoffs, it's the per diems, it's the taxes, it's the things that are out of our control as a mortgage company, right? It's also a way of balancing and invoicing services. Mm-hmm. Mortgage services, they're estimated a little high up front.
Oh, absolutely.
We're required
because you've got an error percentage that you have to stay. You have to stay within.
Right. We have to make sure there's a cost to cure. So anything that's 10% or more, over that 10% allowance, the mortgage company has to eat. So we're very cautious. We set these up that we're charging accordingly and that we're buffering it enough to make sure that there's no shortage at the end. For me, that's one of the biggest changes now versus prior 10, 12 years ago is that we don't have any more, oops, you got to bring an extra whatever to the table.
Morning.
That has solved that problem.
Okay, this is my question now.
Okay.
Pretend I'm the person that wants to buy the home.
Okay.
Okay. What is the steps on everything getting to closing date properly on paperwork wise? So people are watching. If they're a person that's like not a realtor or whatever, and they don't know, they don't know what they don't know.
Okay.
What's the steps?
Well,
it's like
from a mortgage standpoint or from a purchase standpoint?
Purchase or whatever.
You want to talk?
Well, also from the get-go, if you're looking to buy a home, he's your first step.
Right. So
I'm awesome, and I understand why you want to talk to me.
So what's
I get it, but
what's the steps that you need?
You
to
must,
make sure?
and everybody that calls, I get a call from. I partner them with someone fabulous like Mr. Merrill here, my Charlie, and they have to get pre-qualified. And if we're in a competitive market and there's going to be multiple offers, we get
pre-underwritten, pre-approved.
There you go.
Okay, so what's next after that?
So I think the application is the first step. And I always tell people, if you're ready to buy a home, our first call is me, somebody like myself, is to understand what is your budget? What's comfortable? What can you afford? The last thing we want is for the agent to show you stuff that you can't afford. I mean, that's...
And shame on any agents out there showing property without a lender letter or proof of funds. I'm just calling all y'all out because I see you posting on Facebook all the time about that stuff. But you get a pre-approval, and if you're in a competitive market, you get that thing underwritten. So to kind of go back to what Michael was asking, pre-approval from Charlie Merrill. Then we get you under contract on the home you want. Then I facilitate paperwork between us and the title company, Aurora Title. If you're using anybody else, I don't know what your problem is. And then
good plug.
It's good plug. And then it's a matter of, a lot of it is up front between your agent and yourself because you're going to do an inspection and you're going to have an appraisal. There might be HOAs involved. So there's a lot of dilly-dally stuff that has to be, so timelines that have to be met. Once we clear that stuff, which is about in the first 2 weeks, really, it all falls on the lender side. They're, all the back end things, all the stuff, ordering the appraisal, doing all that sort of thing.
Yeah, so typically right. So the application comes in, once the contract is ratified and comes in, then we'll discuss ordering mortgage services. But again, we like to present this as an underwritten approval. I think it adds strength to somebody's offer, and especially in this competitive market, right? I think you can compete with cash. I mean, you've got an actual qualified borrower with a commitment lender to lend from a local lender.
Well, and not only can you compete with cash, you compress your closing timeline.
Absolutely.
So instead of being 45 days or so, going from start and scratch, you're already pre-underwritten.
Correct.
We've shaved off 2 weeks easy. So now you can go into a seller and go, listen, I can do, 30 days, 21 days, depending on how, your loan product, right? And getting appraisers out and stuff like that. But you now have taken away, so cash usually plays on the I can close quickly, there's no loan involved, blah, blah. Now you can compete with that cash. Because at the end of the day, to a seller, it's all cash.
Correct.
Come on, let's be honest. You know what I mean? And I've had loans beat out cash, not because we offered way more or something. It was just a better constructed deal, and the terms were better.
And it's quicker. Like sometimes, I can get this done in X amount of days.
And sellers, for the most part, unless they're in distress, if they're not in distress, they're looking for the dollar. That's what's talking to them. If they're in distress, terms of getting them out and helping them move on, that's one thing. But if you're talking about just general traditional resale, all sellers, we all are homeowners, we want, best terms that net us the best bottom dollar. That's the scoop. And just in our conversations, and great question on your part, Michael, do you see how complex this can get really fast? It can get complicated really fast and get out of control.
Like everyone says, this is one of the biggest purchases you're ever going to make.
Yeah.
So why not have professionals help you along the way?
That is a $1 question.
You know what I'm saying? Because they're trying to scoop by not paying fees or whatever. But in the long run,
what have you won? So she blew her closing date.
And unfortunately,
we have a U-Haul or a moving truck full of furniture.
That's what, about $1,000 there, $700 there.
You've got to get those folks to store. You're now homeless.
Yep.
You're going to have to go to an apartment short term or some kind of executive rental will cost you. Oh Lord.
$400 every 2 weeks or something like that.
Easy.
Well, we did recover nicely. That was a Friday that happened.
That's because of you.
Thank you.
Okay.
We ended up closing them Monday night. So we did turn it around. I think there's, communication. I'm big on communication.
100%.
In this particular case, a lot of this
could have been averted.
Of course. Yes, it would have been nice to have agents. Yes, it would have been nice to make sure we met all these, milestone dates.
Deadlines would have been nice.
If there was a better communication from the borrower, and we really tried, it was just, she was overwhelmed working a full-time job. And that's what I explained to her. I said, this is why we're here.
Right. Because this is our full-time job.
Right. When I clock in the morning, my focus is you.
Right.
When you clock in, your focus is on your work. It's two different things. And,
right.
In that particular case, it was sad. We don't like to miss closing dates. We have a very strong close ratio at C&F. I pride myself on making sure every transaction, gets a 5-star rating. But in this particular case, it was an ugly scenario, and we did rebound nicely from it. But I think it's more, it really plays more to the fact that it's really important to look forward, not to save just the dollar, but look at the big picture here, and having those real estate professionals in play to help you be successful. Because you said it earlier, it's the biggest transaction probably
any of us will make. We're not. Think about it. Your largest investment is your primary residence.
Yeah, I think there was over $1 million between the two transactions. It's like, it's a lot of money, to screw up.
And luckily for her, things did work out, but it could have not. And she could have been without a house, without a future home. I mean, there's a lot of things and we've seen those things happen too.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There have been a lot of situations that have been catastrophic, not only financially, but from the stress and the personal, just the living through it, you know, as if COVID in the last 2 years wasn't bad enough.
It's just funny because I look back at my 26 years. It's the only case that pops out that was so disastrous.
26 years,
and it didn't have to be, right? I mean, you have an excellent credit borrower with plenty of assets, and it's like, this should be a slam dunk. And it's like,
those are the worst ones.
Yeah.
You know, the ones that you're like, oh, this is gonna flow, and then you're like, the car.
Yeah.
You know.
But again, I've seen a lot of craziness in my career, but that was one recently stuck out.
So don't. The moral of the story, my fine people, is you don't know what you don't know. I don't know what I don't know. Right. You know, it's not like just because, you know, you and what you do, Michael, the technical stuff that you and Eddie do, or me, what I do, or what you do. I don't try to get into other industries and play in their lane. You know what I mean? I don't, like I said, I have a degree from MCV in dental hygiene. I don't clean my own teeth, right? I don't jack up my own car and try to change the oil. I let professionals do what they do.
And we eat, sleep, and breathe this stuff, right? I mean,
oh my God, it is, and it's 7 days a week.
Yeah.
Not like I'm on the road 7 days a week, but I am either talking to or thinking about it or researching.
I really do think it just comes down to you don't want to pay. I mean,
but what does it cost you in the end?
That's but I'm saying, like, if you said he's free, you'd be jumping on white on rice. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
I think it's just coming down to trying to get the most out of both
squeezing that turnip.
And also the realtor. Some realtors don't really buck it because they're like, oh, maybe I'll get a little more of this deal. And, you know what I'm saying? And so they don't kind of, you know.
It's absolutely.
What's the old saying? Was it penny rich, dollar foolish?
100%. Yeah.
You know,
they're stepping over a dime to pick up a penny. You know what I mean? Or they're stepping over $1 to pick up a dime. You know, and in the mortgage industry, even at our current rates, when I tell buyers or anyone what it really costs you a month, it's pennies on the dollar.
Yeah.
It really is. I mean, it's like, you know, so let's take a rounded number and say it's $5 for every, you know, was it 1,000 that they spend? It's on a monthly mortgage payment. It's not anything to like lose your, you know, life over laying at night staring at the ceiling with under a lot of stress.
Well, there's some adjustment, right? I mean,
sure.
There's no doubt that in this environment that we're now, I mean, you know, the prices are steadily going up. I looked at my tax assessment for this year.
Oh my God, what happened to the city of Richmond?
Oh my gosh, 34% increase.
I have a client over off of Jank Road. It went up 138%.
You know, I think that's
what in the
you know,
holy heck?
if I could say something to Richmond, I would just say, you know, I mean, where you know, how is this not illegal? Like no other business could you upcharge somebody for services, you know, 150.
Our service is now 100% more than it was last year. You know?
So, you know, I think there's a lot to be said. I mean, the market does dictate. Rate has a play in that overall payment, right?
Of course.
You know, budgeting's important, right?
Right.
You're still getting lots of appreciation right now.
Yes.
Right? It's still a strong investment.
Yes.
So when I first started in the late 90s, I remember, now I was selling, as a broker, I was selling a lot of, you know, subprime, that evil word, you know, the BC paper. And we were selling rates 7.99% on 228s, 2-year fixed rates with 28 years adjustment. You know, we were selling all kinds of really crazy products.
My first house was 8.5%.
Yeah, I mean.
In the early 90s.
I think my first was close to 7% or something. And
I was like, that's awesome. I thought it was the best
they'd
thing.
come down big time from the 80s, you know, in the early 90s. And
right, because when my parents had bought they were talking about 18% back in like late 70s and early 80s, you know, and that's the thing, you know. Interest rate
average home back then also was probably 50
true.
50 or 60,000.
I don't disagree with that, but at the end of the day, when you're dollar for, if you're looking at things in a more less emotional way, let's put it that way. If you're looking at real estate as an investment and not just your personal home, and you're kind of being very more critical of the black and white transaction of it all, you're getting tied up about dollars. At the end of the day, it's not going to matter, you know, 5 years, 10 years from now, you know, in my opinion. That's how I see it.
I also, I don't like to ever, especially when I'm meeting with a client and we're talking about budget, and budgeting is the number one. We've got to hit that point. We've got to understand, what a client's needs are.
Right.
And what I don't ever want to do is base a decision on what potentially could happen in the market in the future.
We don't have the ability.
We don't, but we do know that markets are cyclical, right? And we do know that right now rates are at the all-time high. There is a very good chance.
They're at an all-time high for this timeline.
Well, yeah, they're all-time high correct. For I would say the last 20 years. Last 15 years, let's say. I mean, we've got an entire generation that's never seen, higher than 4%, right? So, there is an adjustment for new buyers, and we've got a first-time housing market that's just been so squeezed,
it's been decimated.
Right.
Well, also, there's people that are even younger than me that are like, well, I want the $450,000 house, and it's like, well, you haven't worked long enough to afford.
They don't know their idea of a starter home is not like what our idea of a starter home was.
No, my first starter home was $160,000.
My first home was $91,000.
Yeah, there's a generation of now where it's like,
well, they want to be in their parents' home. They want to be in that type of home already.
Yeah.
Wasn't that like the new statistic is the average stay at home is like 28 years of age before they leave the nest?
Yeah.
Our generation was 18.
Oh my gosh, I couldn't wait to get out of the house.
Oh gosh.
Not that I had a horrible childhood. It was just like I couldn't wait to get my license. I couldn't wait to have my own apartment. I wanted to be independent.
I was 21.
But
20, 21.
Yeah, that's fair.
You know what I'm saying? I didn't go to college. I worked full time or whatever. But it was
but you had a plan, right? I mean, there's a lot of folks that are just kind of hanging out and.
My first apartment is smaller than this basement.
Yeah.
Literally.
Well, we've got one right now. I mean, and I kind of make fun of with my wife. I mean, I don't think he's ever going to leave the house, but he's very comfortable in our neighborhood.
You're making it too easy, Charlie.
Probably. And we had a conversation the other day, and he was just making a remark. How he was sleeping till 11 o'clock. I'm like, look, he's got a school and then a part-time job, and his life is so easy. Like, gets up at 11, he eats breakfast, he's down playing video games, and I'm like, man, you're 21 years old. Like,
here's the thing that, and I would do, and if we adopted someone at 12. When she turned 18, she left and all that, and not in the best terms or whatever. But I have two younger kids now. In that scenario, I'm thinking of my 7-year-old, going to be 7-year-old. Like, I would probably buy the apartment or get the apartment.
Yeah.
Start like having them live there and start weaning things where it's like to get the ball rolling. If he's not going to go to college, if he's not going to go and, you know what I'm saying? So like put him in a area that is nothing like medium, not, great, but whatever. And like kind of, I literally just thought about this like a week and a half ago.
Boo. I'm telling you, because you're going to, you're living it. My kids both graduated, they were doing very well, living at home. I'd come down in the morning. It looked like a frat house, pizzas everywhere, beer cans, people that I didn't give birth to on my sofa. You know what I mean? More.
I grew up in a house where you weren't allowed to be in certain rooms until it was like that time of season.
I mean, it was
seen, not heard.
There was no. So, I did not leave my keys. It was in the same spot.
Yeah.
I had my little area, and that was it in my room, and that's it.
Well, and I just, I enjoy my kids, and I think they're wonderful people. I like them. That's a great place to be, and I think it's okay that they wanted to still hang with the mama. But I came down one stairs and I said, you guys, it was a summer. It was like the summer before COVID. I said, you have until the end of the summer to go find another place to hang because you're not hanging here. And they're like, what you mean you're asking us to move out? Yes, I am. And Mama's going to get a boyfriend, and we're going to do some stuff on the patio that you may not want to witness. So that's how and they're like, oh, that's disgusting. I'm like, then get it together. Let's go get some applications. Let's go. But that's, and I even my mother was alive at the time. She passed away. Both of my parents passed away, not, like within 18 months of each other, but I went to her assisted care facility and said, listen, I told the kids they got to move out. Do they want to leave?
Probably not.
I don't really give a shit. Let's do that. I don't give a shit or any fucks, okay? They're getting the hell up on out of here because mama wants a life and to decorate her home that doesn't look like a bunch of teenagers. I mean, they were in their early 20s. They're young adults. You are capable. You're making the money. Go do something with your life. And you know what? That was helpful because one has bought a home with his fiance. The other one is in their own apartment. They're doing very well financially. They're handling their business. It forced them to level up, and it was a good thing. And I don't have any regrets. And in fact, I called the first weekend I was by myself completely. I called my aunt, my dad's baby sister, and I said, Aunt Brenda, the kids are gone. How long is it going to take me to be okay with this? And she goes, a bottle of wine and you'll be fine. So there you go, you know, and you know, you're going to be facing it, and you're facing it right now, and it is what it is. But, you know, it's a good thing. They need to grow up. They're the next generation. We need someone's making payments to Social Security. Come on.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Well, let's wrap this up, Charles. Can you hang out for a little bit longer?
Sure,
I think we got some more stories, and you're going to like it because it's ghost stuff. You like ghost stories.
Yeah.
Right? So we're going to talk about that.
Oh, sure.
So thank you for being with us today. You don't know what you don't know. Go find someone who does. Partner with them and go live your best life.
Like and subscribe.
Like and subscribe. Michael always gets angry with me. Like, subscribe, swipe right. Send it to a friend. Don't do it like a dating app and swipe left. Swipe right, my friends. I can't wait to see you again. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to today's episode of Real Estate and Bourbon with Don Roy. If you have any questions about something you've heard on today's episode, send us an email to realestateandbourbon@gmail.com.